Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, the topic is pretty interesting. It is about the Pakistan's economic structural reforms. We always talk about providing a conducive environment to the people working to be more productive, more efficient, and then there needs to be a good smooth flow of the working conditions. So, primarily the idea is to be more productive within a given time frame. There have been various structural reforms, whether you talk about health reforms, you talk about banking reforms of 1980s, or you talk about so many other areas of concern. In certain areas, Pakistan has really progressed and we have done much better than the regional partners. But when you talk about certain more areas, when you look at the reports from the World Economic Forum or the World Bank, for that matter, there are areas of prime concern, prime importance, and also one has to ponder upon them. We always say that Pakistan is a very rich country. As far as the geographic location is concerned, I think it is the best. If you just look at the map of the world and you fold it and you open it, you'll see the center would be Pakistan. So that is the importance. Historically, it has always been a trade route. At the end of the day, you look at the agricultural side, you look at the water resources, you look at the kind of crops we grow here, you look at the kind of fruit and vegetables we have here, one of the best in the world. But there is no value addition. You talk about the number of people living in Pakistan. The estimates, they tell us that there are around 200 million and more than 60% are youth. What have we done in that regard regarding the population? Or how do we know that how many people would be requiring jobs and how to allocate them? Have we provided them enough space to have government jobs or private jobs? Is the businesses, are they growing to that level? No, sir. At the same time, when you look at the entrepreneurship, that is another very important area. Small and medium enterprises, large-scale manufacturing, foreign direct investment coming into Pakistan, or for that matter, tax reforms. The more money you have, the more money you have to spend. How to collect that money, not start squeezing already those lemons which have been squeezed before. You need to go after more people. The tax base is the lowest in the world. The tax to GDP ratio is still in single digits. Should be around 14 to 16% if you're a developing nation. You look at the index, we were really happy. Well, you know, India is in their 60s when it comes to the development of the developing nations. Look at Pakistan, we are at 57th. Wow. No, sir. If you look at the top 10 countries, you talk about Latvia, you talk about Lithuania, talk about Romania, you talk about Hungary, you talk about Poland. These are all the Eastern European countries doing so well among the top 10. You talk about Latin America, you talk about Costa Rica, you talk about Ecuador. You'll see what exactly they have done. So they've done something good. Their environment is the same. Though we have got tensions on the western border, we've got tensions on the eastern border. But having said that, you just can't blame the law and order situation or the war against terrorism for everything. That yes, we have lost a lot of money. That is the prime concern, that our finance chief, who is the finance minister, goes to Dubai to meet the members of the IMF. Why don't they come to Pakistan? At the same time, we say, well, you know, we are providing you a perfect environment. What a perfect platter this is. Come and invest in Pakistan. Well, why not? If I'm an investor, I would prefer going to Sri Lanka or Bangladesh. Is it all about the rate of return? But there are so many factors which are involved. Then you have a vision, 2030. Well, we want to see Pakistan like Malaysia. I've heard the same when I asked the former chairman of the Planning Commission in early 2000. And he said, well, you know, in 2020, we would be something like Malaysia. So this is 2017. Can we be like Malaysia in 3 years? No, sir. There is something wrong somewhere. Is it the red tapeism? Is it the structural policy? Is it the non-productive debate which we see in the parliament? Is it all about petty issues, or should be more concerned about the real legislation? Post 18th Amendment, yes, health, you talk about education, all these are the issues of the provinces. But don't you think it should be a uniform system in the school when it comes to school? Because a student coming from Balochistan working in Islamabad would be having a different mindset as somebody coming from Karachi for that matter. So there needs to be a certain platform. A lot needs to be done. I'll try to cover up as much as possible in our today's program. But since the subject is huge, we'll try to touch upon as many issues as possible. Let me introduce to our panelists. On my right is Abid Hassan Saab, needs an introduction. Is an economist who served at the highest level in national financial institutions. So thank you very much. We have with us Banday Saab, again needs no introduction, is an economist, is the head of Prime Institute, sir. Thank you very much. And in a little while, we'll be joined in by Abdullah yousaf, the former head of FPR, so that we can talk about the tax reforms also. We've been hearing much about that also. First of all, sir, Pakistan's economic structural reforms. Let's start off 1950s. There were issues. Pakistan came into being in 1947. In 48, we had a war. There were issues. In 1956, we came up with the first constitution. Good, bad or ugly, but it was there. And then we saw another one in 16, then the last one in 1973, once we lost Bangladesh. We always thought, sir, Pakistan is a big country with a lot of natural resources, but even now, we do talk about those natural resources. Pakistan hasn't been able to actually capitalize on all it had, sir. Let's not blame Pakistan, let's blame the policy. Is that a correct statement, sir?
Well, I mean, I don't know what you mean by let's not blame Pakistan policy. Yeah, absolutely. I think if we look at, I don't know, last 40 years, let's say 50 years, or maybe since we lost Bangladesh, we have underperformed. So it's not, you can't just put on one government or the other. Overall, as a state, we've underperformed in any way you look at. In terms of let's say overall growth over a 3-4 decade, most countries who were kind of like us or had the same natural resource base, had the same human capital, have really progressed much faster. I'm talking of mostly East Asian countries, but more in the, I mean, of course, in 40 years, the per capita incomes have gone up. I mean, if, for example, 20 years back, 50,000 motorcycles were being sold a year, or 100,000 today, it's 2 million. So somebody is, buying those. 60% of households have a TV, 80% have, they say, clean drinking water.
47% have washing machines now.
Washing machines. Yeah. Well, it's more urban, not rural, right? I mean, so anyway, I mean, either way you look at it, or any way you look at it, we've done okay, but far below our potential, in terms both of resources, in terms of capacity of the government, and that's the reason being that we have not kept up with times. Our state has not kept up with improvements in its bureaucracy. Our civil services, the quality, the professionalism, the integrity is all kind of gone down over the years. And if a country is state institutions, right, whether it's the judicial system, as the legislative system, or the executive branch of government, and in many ways, each one of them has underperformed. And so the net result is the state as a whole has underperformed relative to other countries. Looking forward, I think once again, as in the past, we've come out of a difficult time in terms of economic, meltdown. In a sense, we were pretty close to one 3-4 years back. We've picked up, our growth has picked up. But in terms of the structural reforms that you alluded to, whether it is, to me, the most important is reform of the civil services, reform of the judicial institutions. I mean, those are the critical building blocks of a state. If you have weak institutions, you become a soft state. You could have the, most.
And when you talk about providing them a conducive environment, that means whosoever is working.
And
whosoever
so you see, I mean, you could have a lot of electricity, but you could be a very soft state. And that's what's fundamental to long-term sustainability or high growth rate for Pakistan, that you have a state where critical institutions, whether it is central bank, whether it's civil services, whether it's health departments, education departments, agriculture departments, water, irrigation departments, that they work. Similarly, you should have a legislative branch of government that works. I mean, that delivers on good legislation, that keeps a check on the executive branch that they're performing well. Similarly, you need to have a well-functioning judicial branch where contracts are enforced, where property rights are enforced, where you don't have, you have a case and you get dragged for 10, 15
And there are
years.
so many examples. Sir. The only
So, I
thing
mean,
which bothers me, Abid Saab, is brain drain, is the flight of capital, is the investment not coming to Pakistan. These are all areas of
Yeah.
prime concern. But sir, let me move on to Banday Saab. Banday Saab, when we talk about the financial reforms, let me put a very straight question to you. What shakes it and who shapes it, sir?
You're talking about financial reforms. It means that you're talking about the financial intermediation of the
Absolutely.
country. Okay, the access to finance, how deep it is, how much it is available in Pakistan. It's a very interesting paradox that Pakistan's banks have always made money in the last couple of
Post-80s.
decades. Okay, they're making a lot of money, and every year their balance sheets are getting fat. But what we are seeing is that money flowing down into the
Trickle-down
economy
effect isn't there, sir?
is not, because most of that money is parked with the government out here also. We have that crowding out effect also. That is one part only. Bankers are business person. They will be looking for opportunities, and that is their right to make money. What is important for the government is to facilitate the financial sector so that that financial deepening can take place. And that's what you're pointing out, that why we don't have this depth in that access to capital, to access to finance at the lower down.
And the interesting part, I'll just add something here. So when you talk about the rate of return, or when you talk about a certain markup given by the bank, in real terms, that's not there. And secondly, because they always try, when I say they means the government, they always try to make sure that we have lowered the markup so that the private sector borrowing increases. Unfortunately, what we have witnessed over a period of time, let's say post to 2013, when this government, 35% of government borrowing has gone up, 35%. And whereas when you talk about the private sector borrowing, people are still shaky. Is that correct, sir?
The important point is this, that government borrowing is a part of borrowing in every country. That is not an issue. The issue is this, that whether the availability of resources is limited to banks only, what you have the model in internationally, it's not only banks which are providing sources. You have capital markets. Now you were talking about capital market, that it's going through the roof. But
It is indeed.
how many IPOs are there? In the last 2016, when it made all the records, there were, I think so, 4 IPOs. Now, if you look at the
I think
stock
the last
market,
initial public offering which we witnessed was a few years ago.
if you
Can I make a point here? Sorry,
Yeah,
Adrian,
yeah.
before.
Sure.
Just on the credit side, I was looking at some private sector credit to GDP, right? That shows how much
Money is in the-
20% in Pakistan. Private sector credit as a ratio of GDP is 20% in Pakistan, 60% in India, and 110% in Vietnam.
So you can well imagine.
So,
yeah, that's a figure. Okay, I was talking about this access to finance. And when we were talking about the stock market, this stock, Pakistan in total, I mean to say the companies which are registered with SECP as per their record are 67,000. Now the companies which are listed at the stock market are around 600.
Yes.
Okay.
and
Now,
going down.
and going down.
And going down,
It
interestingly.
means it's below 1%. And out of these 600 companies, how much GDP they are producing for the country? Now that is very important question. In US, the listed companies, the big listed companies, produce around 70% of the GDP. So it becomes, their stock market role becomes very important. The stock market becomes really barometer of the economy. In Pakistan, you cannot say that, because these are the questions which are not raised, that when you are putting people, when you are deceiving people, and you are telling this is barometer, you have to ask some hard questions. What is the contribution? When this stock market is not contributing in
What
capital
sort of a
formation,
contribution do you think our stock market is giving?
it
in
is
terms of
only
Is it-
for the rich elite.
There you go, sir.
And I tell you one thing, what is important for us to understand, how many people are there
So
in
if
the
I say that
CDC?
this is the economy of an elite state, is that correct?
Look, Faisal, normally elite in a capitalist economy, elite control the economy. That's not something unusual. What is important, that how they engage the people lower down the echelon. That is more important for us to understand. Now, these capital markets, the role they are playing, they are basically engaging people at the venture capital side, at the startup side. Now, that sort of an ecosystem is not here. we do talk on television about lot many things, but what about the smaller ventures? What about the medium ventures? Have they got the access? They are depending on their organic growth. Now for organic growth, it will take a lot of years. This financial intermediation is very important for this smaller sector to go for an
You need
exponential
to inject
growth.
that steroid into that system
Faisal,
Exactly.
to make it grow at that
the
pace.
number of individual retail investor accounts with capital markets is about 250,000, right? Number of people who are actually have
Involved,
opened an account in a brokerage. Active are 12,000 in a country of 200. So this point, just point that this is a market of 12,000 people, both in
That becomes
neither in terms of
0.005%.
size in contribution to the economy, nor in terms of how many people are actually benefiting or participating. So 12,000 people out of 200 million are actually participating.
Those who are the movers and the shakers in the market.
What you talk about this
Sir.
modern economy, in this modern economy, is Pakistan can be called a modern economy? An economy which is, as very well said by Abid Saab, if you look at the Indian stock market, which is the 11th largest stock market in the world, only one group I'm talking about, I didn't see that, which is Reliance Group, one of the big groups.
Ambani brothers.
Ambani brothers. He's talking about 250,000 people. One Ambani group has over 3 million stockholders, shareholders, retail I'm talking about. Now you're talking about... And
Remember that famous gathering they had in that cricket stadium?
One kid, yeah.
Just imagine. So that's the kind of people you're talking about.
That's they show it, and it means that
The annual meeting took place in a cricket stadium.
we need to deepen this. We need to bring all those international practices
All right.
out here.
Now, first of all, sir, thank you very much, Abdullah Saab. And since we were talking about the importance of Pakistan's economic structural reforms, Abdullah Saab, when you were the head of FBR, I've interviewed you so many times, and every time, even the Prime Minister at that time, he would say, you know what, we have taken off. And I was so surprised. Wow, now this is the time. Economic growth was well over 6%, at times it was touching 8%, and at times 8.5% plus. So when you talk about this takeoff philosophy, don't you think that this financial takeoff was an absolute failure, sir? We never took off, actually. We were lying to each other.
Well, thank you. Let me say that if you were to actually compare that particular period with whatever we are going through now in the last few years, definitely there was a growth rate of 7 to even 8%.
8.7% year.
Right?
Yes.
Now, that does give you that kind of a comfort of growth, because that is the actual growth. What it actually means is that you are increasing your investments and therefore generating more employment and more per capita income, etc. There, if you remember the years 2006-07, I think, the foreign direct investment was about $8.6 billion.
In 1 year, yes, sir.
In 1 year.
2003, 2002.
I think this was 2006-07.
6 later on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, you look at the position today, it is less than 1 billion, right? Now, the point is that how are we actually going to move forward? What is the way forward? The way forward is actually dependent on the investment, whether it is local investment or foreign investment, because that is what actually expands the economy, grows the economy, drives the economy. And we are actually, if you look at our local investment and then we look at our foreign direct investment, we are having a much, much lower base, I would say, at the moment. So
you're giving them the best incentives to the foreign investors, assurance as far as the investment is concerned. The government is primarily sort of is acting like an insurance company in that regard. The rate of return is the highest in the world. 100% equity you can have, sir. Despite that fact, nobody wants to come in. And let's be realistic. I mean, if somebody wanted to come in, so we could have had over 20, 30 billion dollars of investment.
Question is why?
This is what I'm exactly referring to, sir.
The thing is that we the foreign investor, for instance, has so many options. He can go wherever he likes in the world. What he looks for is, number one, is the security of the region. Is he going to be, whether his life or whether his capital, is that going to be secure? And then he looks at the policy of that particular country, and then of course the return, etc., on different investments, and of course then decides to come. Now,
Nestle does a business of around $1 billion a year, sir.
yeah,
That's huge. So don't you think, I mean, if Nestle can do that, no matter what they are making us drink in the form of milk or water, that is a separate chapter. I think we should do a show on that also. But what I'm saying is $1 billion, that's a lot of money, sir.
because
Pakistan is the sixth, if not the fifth, is technically the sixth largest in
You
terms of
have
population.
to understand that clearly with a large population base of 200 million, it is attractive to companies like Nestle because they provide consumer products, right? I mean,
So our middle
Yeah.
class is almost the size
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
population of Turkey, for that matter.
no, those
That's
numbers are
huge.
misleading, by the way. Those numbers are.
But somewhat
Just
close
having
to
a
it.
TV doesn't mean you're. So I mean, anyway, there's a fairly large percentage of population which is buying what are called white goods, TVs and washing machines and bikes and whatnot. And as Abdullah Sahab was saying, look, the investment to GDP, which is, what is the investment, is 10% in Pakistan compared to 20% for the emerging markets. So okay, fine, Nestle is there, there's a Dutch company which has come in. All these investments, by the way, each one of them are all inward looking. There's so little investment, which is one of Pakistan's, I would say, huge issues that we've not been able to address. And really, we haven't had investment in export-oriented industries. Part of the success of East Asia and China, majority of the investments were in industries for export purposes. So we have Nestle, we have we have all these power companies, we have telecommunications. All their revenue is in rupees, but all their dividends are in dollars and profits. So that's why we have this huge mismatch already there. And
Who's going to sort this issue out, sir? Whose job is it?
Well, partly, as Abdullah Sahab has said, and I said, look, we have to create an environment where we get far more. Our overall investment rate must increase. We must provide an environment where it's far easier to produce a good for exports than to sell a good for in the domestic market.
Actually, I want to add what Abid Saab said and what Abdullah Saab. I want to second their opinion on that. And for that, I'm going to present certain numbers. If you look in the 2015, the FDI worldwide is about $2.2 trillion. And out of that $2.2 trillion, the largest one was residing, gone to US. Okay, it's about $379 billion. And second was China, which is about $250 billion. Now, if you look at South Asia attracted about $50 billion. And out of that, $45 billion went to India, the 90%. Now, you're talking about CPAC in 1 year, Indian has attracted $45 billion worth of money from outside, which we are talking equity, no loans. Okay?
The real investment.
So it means that when you are looking at that, like he's talked about FDI to GDP ratio, in China it is 2.2, in India is 4%, in Pakistan it's 0.3%. You're talking about Malaysia, you were given an example, we want to become Malaysia. Malaysia in a single year, the economy of about $300 billion, which is equivalent to Pakistan, with a population of about 1/6, they have attracted $12 billion of worth. Now, I'm just looking at the numbers and I'm saying that, okay, I've got 1 billion, and if I grow at 100 times, okay, 100%, it means 2 billion. And look at the gap of the countries I'm competing. As Abdullah Saab is saying, those countries are already augmenting their competitive edge in the world. Now, how I'm going to compete with Vietnam, which is attracting $12 billion every year?
Look at their exports.
I'm going to compete, like he's saying about export oriented. How I'm going to compete with Indonesia, which is attracting money about $20 billion. Nobody talks about where you are standing in the world. Today you say, I've got motorcycles, everybody's happy. Man, people are getting cars, Ferraris. The people are going ahead. Look in India.
You go to China, you go to Shenzhen or Shanghai, you'll be shocked, sir.
So it means that
America isn't that shocking.
you are
Shanghai is.
You are selling false dreams. You are not putting people on realistic terms that how the world works, how the money is flowing, what are the strategies these countries. Has anybody talked? Let's study today how Thailand is doing things. Let's study today how this Kenya is doing things, how these new emerging markets are doing things.
So when you talk about Kenya, or for that matter, you talk about Ethiopia, I mean, these are two countries we always think, African countries, I don't know what's happening out there, whether people have good food to eat or not. These are the basic questions that pop up in your mind. Ethiopia has the best African airlines, sir. Forget about PIA. I mean, they're not even doing justice to themselves. They are even, you know what happened to that brand new plane. I was so shocked to see that. They can't even manage that, so forget it. You talk about Kenya, sir. I happened to meet the ambassador at one of the receptions. And he introduced himself and I said, well, Kenya, how's Nairobi? So he started showing me pictures. Well, so forget it. It seems as if it's like Dubai. And not Dubai, I mean a developed city. Now, Abdullah Saab, we've always talked about the tax reforms. I think that is if there's structural reforms, the heart of those structural reforms is the tax reforms, sir. What have we done so far in that ground, sir? I feel that, people who are salaried class, they're being squeezed on daily basis, yearly basis. Those who are not even into the net, they are having a ball of a time, sir.
Yeah. Well, again,
don't you think this is the time for the government to take unpopular decisions?
We have serious issues and challenges, of course. Now, on the reform side, the tax reform side, we have, as you know, or today, we have a very, very narrow tax base, as opposed to the potential and what is necessary, I feel, from the national point of view. The tax base has to be substantially expanded. Now the question is, why is it that we are not able to reach there or do it? There is, what I believe and feel is that what we have a cash economy mostly and a non-documented economy. You will never be able to reach out to those potential taxpayers.
So what Narendra Modi did was right, I guess.
So what is the solution? How do you get there?
You freeze those 5,000 notes and half of the 90% of the money would be of no use.
That is what they are now coming
and people
up
like
with.
Resani.
But I feel that
would be in
really,
trouble.
which is the tried and tested solution
Sure.
in many countries of the world, that is your focus on systematization and automation. And automation is now based on your sole identifier, and that is your CNIC number in our case.
Simple.
All this, whatever economic activities are going on, you've got to get the actual sources or information from those sources. And that is actually like, you have bought a house, you've bought a car, you've traveled abroad, you paid your utility bills, and now in the world again, whatever debit or credit taking place in your bank account is electronically made available to the tax authorities. So what
No wonder they're frozen many accounts also.
What it does is, it is actually giving you the entire picture on one screen, that this is what your status is.
Now this man travels so
And,
much, has this kind of car, lives in
everything
that
is
sector,
there.
but pays this much of tax.
Everything is
It doesn't make sense.
provided
Yeah.
on that screen. Now, if you have and when you have that information, then when you are going to confront him, how is he going to get away? So, why is
Provided,
it?
sir,
Why
if there
is
is
it?
will, there is a way.
Yeah, that
Simple as
is
that.
absolutely necessary, and that has to be right at the top, because it has to flow down from there. You have to have this commitment to move forward, and it has to be obviously
But Abdullah Sahab,
across the board.
let's suppose tomorrow means in 2017 June, when the next budget for year 2017-18 is presented, and suddenly we see that, tax reforms, that they have done something remarkable, and now 10% of the people are in the tax net, and this is what we need, but this is what we have. But do we have the capacity to spend that money? We are working on that side, sir. You give me $100 billion to make roads in Pakistan. Sir, I can't do that. Even if that money is, because we do not have the capacity, we're not working on those lines. You
Well-
look for a good cook, you won't find one. Everybody's asking me here, get us a good driver. I said, you know, everybody's a driver in Pakistan, but still you can't get a good driver or good cook. I mean, I'm talking about the very basic level. Somebody who's earning around $200 to $300 a month.
I think my point will be that first you should reach to that point before you start actually questioning how do I use my money, which I've got so much money
But sir,
now.
my point is, are we bringing in those basic reforms, actually educating people, training them, and bringing them up to that level where they can be productive enough? I'm not saying let's compete with the Chinese worker or the Bangladeshi worker. There was a time when we always thought, to be very honest, it's a liability, Bangladesh. I've heard myself people saying, oh, it's okay that Bangladesh is separate, we couldn't have managed it. Now look at where they are and look at where we are.
Well, I mean, obviously we have issues of governance and we have issues of actual compliance and implementation, etc., etc. But then, having said that, we at the same time have the challenges, and we have to look at these issues and focus on them and have the will, as I said right at the top, to say that look, now this has to be done, and
All right.
done across the board without exceptions and exemptions. Okay, you get hold of this, but to leave this cannot work.
This cannot work, sir.
It
A
has
car
to be
cannot
across
run on
the
3
board.
tires.
I
simple.
fully
sir.
agree with Abdullah sir. By the way, I think he was one of the best FBR chairmen, and during his time, you know, a lot of modernization took place. But
The
at the same
automation,
time,
I remember.
automation, yeah. At the same time, I have some very deep disagreements with him, and he knows about it. We are Pakistan, like many countries, is a predatory state. It's an extortionate state. I would hate, if I was the finance minister, I would never give FBR the power to go deep into my private life, because there's extortion. You know, they are the only people in town to collect taxes. There is no competition. To me, it's far more important to reform FBR, to make it customer friendly, to make it less discretionary, to make it high integrity.
Correct.
And then I would do what Abdullah Sahib is saying. But if you don't do what,
You need to have prerequisites.
you have to have these prerequisites, then you go after people, you look
Correct.
into their banking transactions, you look into their
Give me the service, sir. Why wouldn't I pay you the
Abid,
tax?
Abid, this was basically the whole thing which had to be looked at and done. When you talk about, you know, the actual bringing up the FBR, you know, level, again over there, if you would recall, we said there are 3 main stakeholders. One is the government, who has to be provided the maximum revenues. Number 2 is the taxpayer, who has to be facilitated. And number 3 is the employee, who has to be also looked after and come out of this mode of this, you know, corruption and malpractices, etc., etc.
It's a mindset,
But
sir. A
let
lot
me
needs to
tell
be
you,
done. I mean,
Abdullah
All,
For
and that,
example-
you know, we managed that also, and this was really unusual to actually double the salaries of those
but look,
employees
in
of
the
FBR.
US, for example, let's assume they are one of the best tax systems. It's
You pay your own tax?
illegal. Listen to me. It's illegal to have a target. There's no target by IRS. They may have a model, macroeconomic model, which says, okay, if the economy grows by 3%, we are likely to get so much.
a certain
tax,
percentage,
right?
yeah.
There are no targets for individual commissioners, individual staff.
Everybody files their own tax.
Plus, because they know the moment there is a target, individual officers, individual
The
managers
stakeholders.
will then start extortion.
And that is what we have
Yes.
witnessed
Number
over a period
two.
of time in Pakistan.
That Number
is-
two.
80s,
That is
90s.
right.
Number 2,
Right about that.
it's unheard of. I'm just taking the IRS. Of IRS managers, senior managers, commissioners calling up corporates and saying, can you give me more money this quarter? Illegal. That's criminal.
Next year we'll
It's-
facilitate you.
Yeah,
I need to
Abdullah
show
Sahib-
you the right number. And
Abdullah
this has
Sahib-
happened in Pakistan.
Abdullah Sahib, I'm sure that during his tenure, he may have put some cap or curb on this.
Total cap.
Standard.
There
It's
was a
standard practice.
Total cap.
Total cap. But it's standard practice, right?
It has been historic thing, but it was not at all allowed in that particular period. there were refunds which were cleared,
refund,
and
just,
the no question of any advance money, which is unfortunately the normal practice that we've had,
so you are,
and
all I'm
we
saying
are
is,
having.
I mean, I think, I wish she was there for 15 years. But that's one of the issues when I come back to civil service reform. When you have to reform institutions, you have to have the management team, the C-level team in there
The
for
right
at least
people for the right
10
jobs,
years.
sir.
At least 10 years. You can't reform institutions by keep changing your key personnel every 2 years, 5 years or whatnot. But
Actually, I add one thing to it,
Please.
which you raised also, that we don't have the capacity to spend. Now, we were talking about revenue collection. The important thing is this: why these targets are coming? Why these things are coming? Because somebody need money.
That's the government.
You got it, na? That they need the money, and that's why they're pushing the FBR people. They're giving them the target, whatever things they
Not
have.
only
They're
the
coming.
FBR, the State Bank of Pakistan to print more.
That is one
That
option.
has also happened, sir.
That is one
We
option.
have witnessed that.
That's one option. Then you can go to IMF, then you go to
That is
multilaterals.
also happening, sir.
Then you go to China.
That is also
get
happening.
to
You
come and
start
fund my
naming it,
things.
sir.
Okay.
I think, Faisal, when you started this, you basically talked of structural reform. Look, if we want to be an East Asian tiger, which the current government, the previous government, the Musharraf government, everybody wants to be an East Asian tiger, right? You cannot be on a high growth path for a long haul if you don't fix your institutions. Yes, you may have 6, 7%, 8%, then it collapses. Okay, we have picked up, it's now 4, 5%, maybe they get to 6, I doubt it. But if you don't
They're eyeing at 5.5.
if you don't do the underlying fundamental structural reforms,
There is no point, yes.
you can never be an East Asian tiger.
Absolutely. Now, Banday Saab, when you talk about obviously economic reforms, financial depth and economic growth, how closely are they linked?
They're very much linked. The whole industrial revolution in Europe has come due to this financial reforms, because till the time you don't understand the banking system and its link with the capitalist economy, we cannot move forward. It's a very important linkage between the two. And that's what we need to understand, that this money which these banks as an intermediary is collecting has to go there to the people who can contribute to the real economy, not into speculation, not into real estate or into stock market, into real economy.
What happened in Iceland in 2007-8? Same thing?
I mean to say that we are talking...
They also played in the same ground. I mean, they were smart.
We are talking about the bubbles, then you can talk about 2008, what happened. These bubbles, these asset bubbles have been a part of a capitalist economy. Okay, the important point is this: yes, they do burst, but how they come back, how resilient these economies are. Pakistan never faced that sort of a thing. It was never that much integrated with the global economy. That's why it never faced those sort of things. Look at Dubai, UAE, how much it was affected after that 2008 bubble which was burst.
Just look at
Now you look at
their real estate business. I mean, just
exactly.
went down.
Then you have these 2000 dot-coms. Okay, so these bubbles, they come and go. What is important for a capitalist economy is to recoup, and in that, financial sector plays a very
Or it should
important
have
role.
enough power to absorb that shock, sir.
Exactly.
Do we have that kind of a shock, sir? If the global recession is there, for example, there is a war in South China Sea. I'm just giving you a worst case scenario. America is at war, or economic war, or whatever war.
The point is,
Are we
this
going to
that
suffer,
how
sir? Are we
much-
dependent that much on the
how-
global
no, no,
economy,
I
on
need
that
to say,
macro environmental factors?
Like Abid Sahab is talking, our trade to GDP ratio is very low. We have about $70 billion we are doing in the mutual trade, which is an economy of $271 billion.
About 280, 85.
280. It means that what happens when international markets squeeze. Now, what is important for us to understand, if they squeeze, people don't lend money, the banking, the
That's
payment
the
system,
natural reaction,
actually
yeah.
that's what the war it goes. So in that case, how much we are going to affect? How many people over here are going to affect? Now, if we are talking of a Chinese economy, which has about $4,200 billion of trade, now that effect will be much more on Chinese economy as compared to our economy or a US economy. The more economy is integrated, so any vibration which goes into the financial system affects everyone. Like that bubble which was burst in 2008, it affected everyone. Like these debt crisis which is being faced by Greece, it is affecting Europeans. They're putting pressure on that. The German taxpayers have to bail out the Greek economy.
Yes.
Okay, So that sort of an integration are not here in Pakistan. So its effect will be relatively less as compared to other economies which are more. Like likewise, that's a pros and cons of the equation. It means if those economies are affected, when they will rebound, they will gain more. Pakistan will remain an isolated player in the whole global market economy.
Abdullah sir, these loans we get, I mean, I still remember when you were the chief, Shaukat Aziz was the prime minister, and he said, you know, finally, the word shikanja, I still remember, was used, that, you know, we have gotten rid of this IMF. So we are back on track again, taking loans from IMF. And whenever I hear the finance minister says, well, you know, these were loans, they were meant for a country like Pakistan, and they were on a very small markup. Why shouldn't we take it? Because the point is that should we take them, or can we say no? Because nobody can force me to take loan. I mean, these guys call me up for various schemes on insurance and all. I always say that, no, I don't need it. Simple.
Actually, see, the point is,
it's not that
very,
simple.
Very simple answer. Loan means that you are supposed to carry some burden. Now, if you look at our overall position of the economy, one side you have a trade deficit and the other side you have a fiscal deficit.
Both. Increasing.
Both sides, and unfortunately they are also increasing. Particularly on the trade side, we got the exports going down. We got
not even $20 billion, sir. I'm afraid what's going to happen next year.
Foreign remittances also taking a downslide. You are increasing your deficit. And on the fiscal deficit side, you have that deficit and you are having to borrow this money. And you are, of course,
highest borrowings from the State Bank of Pakistan so far.
Increasing your overall debt.
Internal or external? Both.
Both. And that is, you see, adding to your real challenge. Now you look at your budget today, your number one item is your debt servicing.
The 3Ds.
1.3 trillion rupees is your number one item.
Debt servicing.
As your expenditure.
Yes, sir.
And then, of course,
defense
and other things which come up.
And then development.
Yeah. Now, just imagine that. And when the debt keeps on going like this, your debt servicing is going to keep on increasing, and we are supposed to actually repay that debt also sometime.
So you are taking loans to pay back the interest you're supposed to pay.
Right now, we are having that kind of unfortunate situation.
Yes.
See, now this is a very critical and a very serious matter, and that you will actually not be able to
Are we
overcome.
considering that as a serious matter, by the way, sir?
Well,
by looking at the overall scenario, whatever you read in the papers or watch on the television
the fiscal deficit side has to be made up from your revenue mobilization effort, which is again having a big trade gap, tax gap. You know, there is almost 79% is the tax gap. That was the last survey which was done, which should be more now, I would say. Which means that if you are collecting 100 rupees, you are not collecting 79 rupees.
That's the grey area of economy,
based
sir.
on your overall economy situation. Okay. Now, we are collecting, let's say, 3.1 trillion. So we are not collecting another 2.4 trillion maybe. If we are actually going to be able to collect that, then we should end up with a surplus of our fiscal position as opposed to this deficit.
It won't be deficit, it would be the positive side, yeah?
Yeah, that is what you have to have, and it is going forward, it is inevitable actually.
Sir,
from
the answer should be
point of
yes or no, sir. Are we moving in the right direction, sir, as far as the economy is concerned?
Generally, I would say yes.
Banday sir?
Yeah, I do agree with that we are moving in a direction. And actually, I just want to add that trade deficit side, which he was talking
Quickly, sir.
quickly. Onto the trade deficit, with you talking about IMF coming into it, the option is only IMF. I mean to say, why you need foreign currency loans? That is a question. And I think so we can talk about it later.
Well, sir, if you want to build a dam, you don't have money. You get that money from a you know, from
I
a
mean to
certain
say how it
institute,
finance. It's
and then
only
utilize
IMF.
it wisely and
It
return
is
it
only
back.
IMF. You have got international capital markets also.
IMF is not for project finance.
Exactly.
Abdullah sir?
It's not.
Actually, regarding the movement, the direction of the policies, that is what you wanting to know. I think we are definitely wanting to move in that direction. But we, as I said earlier, we have big challenge and we are not yet actually able to, actually what I would say is to get to that point where you have to.
So a lot
in order
needs to be done, sir,
achieve,
and a lot needs to be done
the results.
on immediate basis. You know, we keep hearing that this is what is going to happen and that is what is going to happen. But the point is, at the end of the day, sir, I was reading a very interesting article about the rating agencies. You know, we talk about Moody's, we talk about so-and-so, S&P and all. Interestingly, sir, certain companies who were AAA rated in 2007-8 went bankrupt the next day. And I fail to understand when we hear that, you know what, our rating has increased from B minus to B to B to B plus. And I fail to understand on what grounds. Anyway, sir, thank you very much. Banday, it was a pleasure. Abdullah sir, was a pleasure with you. That's all we have for this hour. I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.